Speaks to the Conservative MP and prominent Leave campaigner during the EU referendum, Rees-Mogg. He's at our studios in Westminster. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you've scoured everything that Sir John had to say. This is the second former Prime Minister, both from different parties, that have felt the need to come out and warn not just the public but the government about concerns that they have in their experience about how Brexit is being handled.
Yes, well, the British electorate voted against what they recommended last year. And you have to remember that St John Major was remarkably unsuccessful in his own dealings with the European Union. He got us into the exchange rate mechanism, which was a catastrophe economically, and his failings in dealing with the European Union led to him taking to the Conservatives to their heaviest defeat for the best part of a century.
So you're saying this is personal. He actually admitted in his speech that the EU is not perfect. He's not talking about the EU, he's talking about Brexit. He's talking about what it means for Britain. He didn't say there should be another referendum. He said he's concerned about the way Brexit has been negotiated and handled.
It's a very negative speech, and it's pointing towards a second referendum. If you look at the bottom of page 13 of his speech, you will see a comment. He says, the more one examines probabilities, the more contentious becomes the task of leaving. That implies that he's not actually accepting the result of the referendum, that we are leaving. I think it's rather a bitter speech by a Prime Minister resoundingly rejected by the electorate in 1997 and his views once again rejected last June.
Can we just talk about a few of the things that he pointed out? He said that there was too much optimism for a good deal for Britain. He expressed concern about the way the government was treating European Union leaders. He said there needs to be more statesmanship, and he warned about the reliance on the United States.
Well, let's take those points in turn. The first point, I think, is completely fatuous, that when you enter a negotiation, any sensible person goes into a negotiation full of optimism and expecting a good result. To go into the negotiation wearing sackcloth and ashes and to say that it's all going to be a disaster, as Mr. Major, Sir John Major, suggests, would be absurd, and perhaps that's why he was so unsuccessful in his European negotiations. As regards our relations with European partners, actually I think Mrs May has been very positive, very friendly towards them, and has emphasised that it is the EU we are leaving, not Europe, and she's tried to be as generous as possible to EU nationals who are already here, only to be stymied by Mrs Merkel. And in regards to the point on the United States, I was surprised by his anti-US positioning, that the US is a close ally for us, but that he thinks the whole world is the US and Europe. It isn't. It's China, it's India, it's Brazil. We've got to look to the international field rather than purely the narrow EU sphere.
Well, Jacob, let me pick you up on that, because already Theresa May has been to India and agreed to relax visa regulations for Indians, particularly Indian students, but also those that want to come and live and work in India. So that could mean more immigration. And you know that one of the central messages of the referendum campaign to leave was about immigration. And EU leaders have made it very, very clear we cannot remain in the single market if we will not allow free movement into the UK.
Well, I don't want to remain in the single market because it's a regulatory trap. The regulations we get from the EU relate to the single market and have made our industry less competitive.
So there could be no deal then?
No, we're not going to remain in the single market. Mrs May has made that absolutely clear. She made that clear at her speech at Lancaster House. That's different from not having a deal. The deal will be broader simply than the single market. On your point on immigration, the question is, we will decide. And it may very well be in our national interest to have IT engineers from India coming rather than having Bulgarians coming over without so much as a by your leave.
There's a lot of fear as well about the so-called cliff edge. If a deal can't be reached, we still have to leave anyway. How can you assure people tonight, those who voted for Brexit, that this isn't leading over the cliff edge, that Britain isn't going to suffer, as John Major said tonight, economically as well as politically?
John Major and the people like him have been forecasting disaster again and again. It is the same old tune, the cracked record. I would say it's like Cassandra, except she got her forecasts right. It's just nobody believed her. They are full of gloom and depression, and they've turned out consistently to be wrong. That there are ways of dealing even with a cliff edge. I happen to think the cliff edge is unlikely, that there are WTO terms that we can fall back on, and that trade will continue because the British people want to carry on buying German cars and the Germans want to carry on using UK financial services, and that's done by individuals, not by states.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much for your time this evening.